to this forum on indigenous plant species. It's actually the second time we're doing this. The first time was at the Good Seed and Fruit Festival, which was held in September at the National Botanical Gardens. But it was a different audience. There's quite a lot of farmers and a scattering of private sector. So I found the proceedings so interesting that I thought it would be good to share it on this platform. We won't be going through everything that we did that day, but I think today we can get a pretty good summary and give you a good feel for what's going on in that space. Before we start, I know the panelists would love to know who exactly is in the room. So maybe we can just start with some self-introductions, maybe start with Stuart and then work our way around the back. So just name and organization, please.
Thank you, Mike. I'm Stuart Wilson, product consultant with the many commercial farmers. Mark Benjamin, consultant.
Pyramid Pakistan.
Business,
previously TG and Foundation, and also an individual member. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Good afternoon. I am Hamila Janga from Kanatika Personal Care and Infrastructure. And this is my partner, Chishan from the
She doesn't talk.
I know, she's just what I'm not doing. Yeah, Highland, it doesn't look like.
James Carnegie, solar consultant. Shelton Bagania,
Good afternoon.
Great.
Very just
Great. So thanks very much, everybody. And our panelists, starting with you, Anna.
Anna Brazier, I'm a Sustainable Development Consultant. My name is Caroline Jacquet. I am with Bio Innovation Zimbabwe.
Kangilema Roa with National Foods Limited.
I'm Patricia Warambwa from Bielba.
Wayne Moss from Mr. Bland.
Right, so we're all getting to know each other a little bit. I think we can start. Oh, I'm Michael. Sorry. I'm Michael Dawes. I'm with the Market Linkage Association, who are facilitating this meeting today. As I mentioned, this is sort of a rerun of what we did at the festival. And one of the main organizers of that was Bio Innovation Zimbabwe. And Caroline is here today representing that organization. So I thought we might just kick off with Caroline explaining what is BIZ and what is that festival?
Thanks, Michael. So I just wanted to start by giving you a tiny little bit of background as to why indigenous plants as well. So did you guys know that we have over 6,000 plant species in Zimbabwe, and that at least 20% of these plant species have some or a lot of commercial potential, but that today less than 1% are being commercially exploited. And if you then also know that 60% of Zimbabwe's 16 million people live in rural areas, that's 60 to 70% of these people are poor to extremely poor. That's these very poor people also live in the driest areas of the country. And that those driest areas of the country actually make up 62% of the available land in the country. It just kind of gives you a little bit of a background as to realize that, you know, the conditions are not really great for crops like maize and wheat and soybeans. That very often they're not even great for small grains and local legumes like cowpeas and Nemo, and even livestock is very often, you know, a struggle. But that luckily, you know, in these very dry, very poor areas, there's fabulous, phenomenal biodiversity. You know, and that these local indigenous plants are actually, you know, very well adapted to the droughts that are, you know, more and more regular in this country. So, you know, if you think of all of that, you kind of wonder why farmers still keep going back to, you know, growing things that are not extremely suitable to them. And one of the main reasons for that is markets. You know, farmers have no markets for crops that are more suited to them, for plants that they can harvest from the wild. And that's where we decided 10 plus years ago to start Bio Innovation Zimbabwe, to really help link farmers to markets for those indigenous plants. And not only did we want to link farmers to markets, but we also wanted to assure markets, you know, processors and consumers as well, of high quality products. So that was absolutely essential for us as well. Not just find markets, but also really make sure that that market would get quality. We work with a whole lot of indigenous plant species at the moment. Many of them have food applications, but some also have cosmetic applications. Some have pharmaceutical applications. Some even just have ornamental applications. You know, like the resurrection bush, for example. I'm sure you're familiar with resurrection bush, or Mufadichi muka, the plant that dries up when it's dry and then comes back to life as soon as it receives some water. We actually have buyers buying twigs for that specific reason, you know, like florists. Yeah, so that's what we do at BIS. We help farmers find markets for indigenous plants. We basically intervene at any point in the value chain of a commodity where we feel assistance is needed. So that can be right at, you know, production level, where we, if it's around wild harvesting, we'll make sure that we do resource assessments so that we know the kind of volumes that possibly can come out of an area. We work around domestication. We work around cultivation guidelines if it's a cultivated crop. Hygiene, organic principles, even organic certification, if that's what the market requires, processing equipment, and then we work a lot with private sector as well, around product development, taste testing, consumer awareness raising, and that's where then the food festival comes in, because it's one of our sort of like main annual events where we link, or where we bring together the farmers, the processors, private sector, and general public to come and learn and also celebrate Zimbabwe's local indigenous crops and plants.
Thank you, Caroline. So it's value chain development from the fields all the way up to the processes. So today's discussion, it's going to be quite focused on the private sector, and that's why we have National Foods Bioba and Mr. Brands represented. But there are other benefits besides the commercialization aspects, and I asked Anna to come and share what those benefits might be. So Anna, what are they?
I think one that people might not think about is the fact that these products, these wild foods, wild cosmetic products, which are also used indigenously, cosmetically, are deeply rooted in the agroecology of the country. So they're very much adapted to different areas. And as Caroline was saying, that's a huge advantage, because in places where agriculture is just not feasible, it means that people can still have a livelihood. Also, they tend to be available at different times of year from agricultural crops. So it means that farmers can have a broader set of livelihood options rather than just being dependent on agriculture. So during the time of year when it's not the agricultural season, they can be harvesting wild fruit or nuts or insects, or we can make it very broad. So there's a whole indigenous knowledge system developed around these wild products, and they're very much entwined in the culture, and they're very much interlinked to indigenous natural resource management measures, which are very, very important. Agriculture is having a very negative impact on the environment in most communal areas in Zimbabwe. It's one of the biggest threats to the environment. But this idea that you can harvest an income from natural areas and therefore protect them and therefore value them is very, very important. So I think that's very, very, in a very, very interesting angle that people don't often talk about. The obvious angle that a lot of people do talk about is the nutritional value. And it has been shown by countless studies that many of the wild fruits, wild vegetables, nuts, and other wild harvested products are extremely nutritious, often more nutritious than the agricultural products that we put so much investment into. So they can have a highly nutritional benefit. And of course, when they're exported to Western countries, people start labeling them as superfoods because many of them have so many different nutritional value. I think another, from the marketing point of view, another thing that people tend to ignore is a lot of these products have a very good shelf life. So for example, baobab, masao, they're already naturally dried. They're adapted to being dried. They last a very long time. They don't lose their nutritional value over time as much as agricultural crops. So they really have that benefit. And also they can be grown. I mean, if they do go to the domestication level, as Biz is trying to do, they can be grown with minimal inputs using agroecological methods. So yeah, I mean, it's just enormous, the potential from the non-markets point of view. But I think it links into the markets point of view because it's sustainable production, and that's very important.
So Anna, I think you largely focused on wild collection, maybe of products that grow naturally. But what of the indigenous foods that are cultivated?
Yeah. Same thing. I mean, as Caroline was saying, unfortunately, with climate change, some of even those are being threatened in certain areas. But obviously, it's a no-brainer that things like sorghum, millets, and the indigenous legumes that have been largely neglected from the agricultural point of view, and the nutrition point of view, but also the markets point of view. So things like cowpeas, mimo beans. There's also a whole new area that Biz has been doing in investigating indigenous vegetables that are very unknown. So everyone talks about blackjacks and amaranth, or blackjack's not even technically indigenous, but there are all kinds of vegetables. There are cucurbits, there are creepers that people eat in different parts of the country that have huge potential. And those things are very underexplored. But then there's the obvious stuff like the small grains, which can be grown with minimal inputs. They're incredibly resilient to pests and diseases. Things like finger millet can also last for 10 years in storage without any grain protectants at all. So that's a huge value, not just for food security and nutrition, but also from the marketing point of view. So they're in this.
So how do they fit into sort of climate change?
They're the obvious answer to climate change. But I think that where the sort of market-oriented agriculture has to meet sustainability is looking at diversity and looking at not just the market for the crop, but looking at the agroecological region. So finding the right crop for the right place is very, very important. And diversity, not just growing in monocultures, but trying to diversify production is very, very critical. And the potential for doing that with indigenous crops is way better than for exotic crops. So maize does not like growing in polycultures, but indigenous crops have been cultivated in polycultures for hundreds of years.
In fact, that more or less is the traditional way that farmers 100 years ago, they used to grow their crops. And then I think sort of science came in and we had some monocropping. It seems that we might be going back to where we started.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you look at all the research organizations, there are so many trials now on intercropping. And it is what people traditionally did and were told not to do by colonial agricultural extension officers. Of course, it is true that yield goes down for the individual crops, but when you look at it as yield in terms of nutrients or in terms of products, it's huge. It's much more than the individual yield from monoculture. So we need to start thinking differently in a climate change world. We need to start looking at how we measure things in a different way.
Thanks, Anna. So let's turn our focus now to the private sector. I've got a few questions lined up.
Can we start with Wayne?
Okay, we can start.
I wanted to ask Wayne, Mr. Grants, what made you consider, because we know that you have a number of products that have local ingredients in them, and with local ingredients, we're not just talking about wild harvest, but also small grains and the local legumes. We know that you have some of these products on the market. What made you consider local ingredients?
I think years ago when I first met you, I wasn't playing with any of these small grain products. I was making meheru and whatever, roller meal and that kind of stuff with maize. And then Biz came with this project to make a mighty meal porridge. And that is where the interest sparked. And in the mighty meal porridge, there's baobab, nemo, sorghum, and groundnuts. And obviously, just during that period and learning and trial and error, then the interest got there and we started expanding into more traditional grains products.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. If I hadn't met you, I probably wouldn't be sitting here.
It'd be weird. Yeah, because I remember Wayne kept saying, but can't we replace a little bit of sorghum with maize? And I was like, no, Wayne, we're trying to prove a point here. We're not adding maize to the porridge. But so when we were developing the porridge and then your other products as well, what would you say are the kind of challenges you were facing and are probably still facing with those products?
I would say skills, the skill set to develop these things. We're shooting blindly for a start, and we are not national foods who can have fancy R&D staff. So a lot of it's done by me. Obviously, you learn from people like Caroline when you go. And I managed to get onto like SARS Association, things like that, and you meet other R&D officers. So I've learned a lot through competing companies and work with them. So it's helped me a lot. I would say that for me was probably one of the biggest. And then again, now you've got this concept, you want to develop a new product. Now it's the equipment that goes with it. Now that's a lot of trial and error. I mean, one of the products for Mighty Meal was to get that groundnut into a powder form. That was difficult in the beginning, but it worked eventually. And I still don't know anybody who can do that. And what's your brains, I'd say. Yeah. My hard work. Yeah, so I would say that was a big challenge for us, but we got it right eventually. And that's again talking to other players in the industry.
And market-wise?
Okay, so on the Mighty Meal, that was one of the first products that were developed. So when we launched it, that's why I fortunately Caroline put a little bit of maize in, because our pallet is not a sorghum pallet. That's a Botswana South African thing. And so we argued about this a lot, and the right actors said to me, you don't dare touch that, otherwise you're gone. And so there's a bit of a problem on the maize. And so it was really difficult, but I think the change came thanks to National Foods. They rolled out a whole lot of a range of products for small grains. And obviously, because of who they are and their sheer size, they had a bigger marketing budget and they could educate people better than what I could. And we found after they developed and put their products in the market, kind of boosted our product. So we love it when National Food develops a new product. Thank you. Yeah. So again, it's teaching the customers and the consumers about the product, about the health benefits, and getting them to try the product. So it was the same with like sorghum meheru, sorghum samp. We were making snacks using sorghum grits. Again, it was very hard. So some of the grits some of the products would work, some of them wouldn't work with the grips. And again, lots of trial and error displaying. I tried with cowpeas. I don't know what cowpeas are used. Still can't answer that question.
Okay, yeah, because that's what that was going to be my next question. Now that you're kind of familiar with sorghum and the other small grains, are you maybe considering, without obviously disclosing any secrets, are you considering looking at more local ingredients?
So it's not quite official yet, but I've nothing to hide. We've developed an energy drink in a sachet. It's almost like a fancy freeze it, and we're playing. Well, our initial design was too close to Red Bull, and we got a bit of a fright. We thought we better not play with that and start again. And then we decided to play with Agrazella and all those types of products. So that's where our focus is at the moment. So the packaging's done. We've played with some of your products, and so that's where we're going to go.
So Wayne, with this new product development, it seems you put quite a lot of investments into it. Are you the main scientist behind it, or do you have a team, or what?
Do I look like the scientist? Not me. There's a South African who had a passion for this, and he's the clever guy who I'm working with on that side of it, on the product development.
Okay.
And so he was more on the energy drink side, and that's why I said, well, what about some grains? And traditional grains, traditional products. And they've got the same products in South Africa. Zambia and that's kind of things. We all spent time in Zambia. He was also in Zambia for Congo milling, that kind of stuff. So that's why we changed focus to those products. But yeah, on the product development and all the fancy technical stuff that he does.
So you mentioned quite a few different ingredients that go into your products. Tell us a little bit about sourcing these ingredients. How do you ever run out? Are they quite common?
So I would say this has probably been the worst year because of El Nino. But before that, you could buy the small grains and those traditional products in Bari and extremely expensive. A good example, I bought sorghum yesterday for $1,000 a ton. So that's good for my small scale farmers. Unfortunately, I'd work out for me. But so we went back to the rural areas. We originally started by setting up our own buying depots in strategic areas, procuring the grain that way, and then we slowly later went into the contract farming ourselves. So it helps us. We're getting some of our stuff grown for us, and then anything surplus that we need, we go and set up depots. And then again, we've also got to know a few of the smaller traders or the reputable traders that trade in those commodities.
Okay. All right.
Do you see a role for NGOs in helping you, with your supply? Because there's quite a number of NGOs.
I would say for anybody, even the bigger corporates, funding is a big problem in this country. And a good example, my small scale farmers this year, I went and bought a contracted sorghum from them. I had to be careful. I felt that they weren't getting enough, but I couldn't pay too much more than my competition. Otherwise, I would have outpriced myself. So I was always $5-10 higher than the competition. And those the sorghum started off at about 170, ended up at about 200 in the rural areas. At that time, those products, when the sorghum was 170 in the rural areas, in town it was 270. So all those small traders, they were buying it 170, $30 procurement fee and transport back to town and making $70 a ton. When the small scale farmer should get that benefit ultimately. So that was the first problem. And again, so how would we deal with that? How would we manage that? Is if we could find ways to get collateral management, warehouse receipt systems, strategic depots, not what I say, so, and have strategic depots in the right areas where we can have warehouse receipt systems and funding to hold stock for the small scale farmer. So at harvest, he can sell what he wants, bank what he wants, and sell it in December, January, February, when he can realize a better price for it. And again, so how do we do that kind of thing? It's not necessarily going to throw cash at us, but possibly facilitate some sort of security with banks for this type of thing where we can put product in collateral management. I mean, that worked for a while. So, Bank ABC, we used to use them a lot. Worked very well. Just that backing, that security and support on that kind of
Okay, over to Bio, but tell us a little bit about your organization. What products, who your customers, well, you don't have to give us the details, but yeah, what's Bioba about?
Okay, so Bioba is a company that is processing baobab, and our main product is baobab powder. There are other small products like the fiber. The fiber is also used as a tea, but our main product is really baobab powder. And our customers, up until 2 years ago, were mainly export. So we were exporting into Europe and America as a superfood, as Anne was saying, because once something like that is discovered and it was registered, everybody recognizes the nutritional value, that is nutritionally dense. And then about 2 years ago, we finally broke into the local market, and that was through Dairy Board. So for us, that then catapulted us into, in terms of volumes, quite large volumes, because when the local corporates start using that as an ingredient, it can only then increase the volumes. So that is what happened for us. And right now we can say probably 80%, 70 to 80% of our volumes are into the local market. Ever since we broke into Dairy Board, we've got other takers now that are using the ingredients in their products. We have worked with Wayne. The baobab in Mighty Meal comes from Bioba. And we've got some breweries that are interested, that are putting baobab into their product. Cereals, I know National Foods as well. So it has helped. So in terms of traction in the local market, we have really seen big.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to switch focus to Caroline, because you had something to do with that Dairy Board.
I mean, because about 10 years ago, one of the plant species that Biz was looking into was baobab. Yes, of course, there was export markets, but we felt that because of what we were saying, because it's such a nutritious sort of ingredient, we felt that it needed to be consumed first and foremost, within the country before you start supplying the Europeans with vitamin C and what. Let's make sure that we have our own, calcium and vitamin C and fiber, etc. And we couldn't find off-takers in Zimbabwe. We just entirely failed. And so we thought, what, let's just set up our own business, and that way create a market for our farmers, baobab. And so this is a founding partner of Bioba. So after that, they took off on their own, but so we have a bit of a history together. And so obviously, yes, when we get approached by private sector, or we do a lot of consumer awareness raising also with private sector. And so we were involved a bit when we were trying to convince Dairy Board to look at Bioba for a product. So usually what we do is we sort of come in from an angle of don't overcomplicate things, guys. Look at what you're already producing, and maybe replace one of your ingredients with one of the local ingredients that we're trying to promote, or add to your product range. If you're already doing jams and you're doing a strawberry jam and a blueberry jam, why not also do a baobab jam? It fits very well within your range. So that's usually how we come in. Like, we're not asking you to do revolutionary new things. Let's just tweak what you have, or add to what seems naturally to add into. But I wanted to ask Trisha, but I don't know if from here, where are we going from here? I mean, are we looking for more markets? Can the baobab resource in Zimbabwe handle more markets? Or are you guys looking at maybe new species, possibly? I mean, where does Bioba, where do you see yourselves going?
Okay, so as Bioba currently we just thought let's stick with baobab, but we do have associated or sister companies that are looking at other species. For us, we definitely think that, in fact, not that we think, we know that the resource in Zimbabwe is still underutilized. We are looking at plus or minus 2,000 tons of fruit that we are currently using, whereas we can use up to 20,000. So we are not even close to 50% of what is available. And if we can make sure that that is used, because a lot of it, I think, is just wasted. Yes, they might, the communities might harvest some and use it here and there, maybe as a porridge, but it's really, at the moment, is underutilized. So we believe that we can actually grow the market, especially in Zimbabwe, because we do have the resource. And if we are able to help the communities get some value out of something that is available in the forest, I think that is what we are really there to do. So we are currently trying to grow that market, both internationally and locally. And we are actually thinking that we are seeing traction. There are other players that are now actually also joining, producing the powder. But in terms of the volumes that we're supplying, especially for large corporates, tend to want some sort of consistency in terms of supply. They don't want somebody who can give them 20 tons today and that's it for the year. So it's just that guarantee to say that, look, we can supply you throughout the year. And that is where we want to get to with more customers.
And explain a little bit how you choose your producers, your collectors, because it's not just an NGO works in an area where there's a lot of baobab trees. They shouldn't just tell the farmers that they work with, oh yeah, just pick the fruits and then we'll link you to Bayoba. It doesn't work like that, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't work like that. So I know both you, Caroline, and we talked about organic certification. So because of that certification, there are certain ways and stages that we pass through when we are, first of all, procuring the fruit. So what we do is we go into an area, we know that the resource is available in terms of a sizable quantity for us to commercialize. And then we deal with the local or leadership in the area. We say, look, we want to work with this community, your community. And then we pitch the project to them or the business idea to them. And then we recruit the collectors. Now, after we've recruited the collectors, what we have to do is to train them on the best methods of collecting, of handling, and then, of course, of packaging and selling it to us. The reason we are doing this is that the areas where baobab is found is also an area where mosquitoes and malaria is really prevalent. So we find that in terms of control of malaria, there's also spraying with pesticides. That pesticide tends to find its way into the food. And it's also not good for the local community, but especially for the international community, you just cannot sell that product if you just have small quantities of that pesticide in the product. So we have to teach them the business methods of handling the product, and then how they package it, how they store it at the homestead, and then we will then supply them with the packaging, and then we go and actually collect the product. We have come through a process of actually buying pre-processed baobab, and we got our fingers burnt. A lot of the product there was contaminated with, unfortunately, with DDT that was being used in certain areas for control of malaria. So all that product we could not use. And a lot of it we sold as stock feed, or some of it we actually had to dump. So because of that, what we do is we only handle, or we only purchase whole fruit. And the whole fruit is then brought to our own rural processing centers, where we do the primary processing. And then finally, the secondary processing is done at our main factory, Eastern Bank. So that process, all that process with the standard operating procedures, is something that needs to be trained to our collectors. And those collectors ultimately get certified in the areas where we are organically certified. And that is in 90% of the areas.
So just on dairy board, there they were hoping to be here as part of the panel today, but Chad had to travel. But I believe that they are the largest off-taker of baobab in the world, consuming, is it 3 tons a month? Or?
I think close to
It's
10.
more, it's
10.
10 tons.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are, well, as of last year, it was 120 tons per annum. So that works out to about 10 tons.
So this is income into the pockets of those people who live in those marginal areas, and I think a very important income source for them.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And just to say what that did is that where we were probably procuring 500 tons per annum, we had to go up to about 1,800 tons just to make sure that we can cater for customers like that. So it definitely then ends up in the pocket of those collectors.
Great. Thanks, Patricia. So let's move on to National Foods. I think you've had a good introduction from Wayne.
He's one of our employees.
He's the marketing specialist. So Scott, could you tell us a little bit about the path to this indigenous, sort of these indigenous products? I mean, what was the idea initially, and what were the reasons, and sort of how has it been? Have there been many challenges along the way, and how are these products doing on the local market?
Right, so thanks for that. So yeah, National Foods as a whole, milling company, maize and wheat, and selling rice. We downpack rice and salt and the likes. But I think around 2017, 2018, we noted a dip in our product sales. So this is your maize meal, and this is your rice, and this is your wheat flour. And main reasons being people are consuming something else which isn't SADA. So potatoes, you can get a pocket of potatoes for $5 now. So they've got an extra type of starch they can consume. In the mornings, not many people are eating porridge. Not many people are eating bread still. So as the maize milling division, and as National Foods as a whole, we thought, how best can we still get the consumer to enjoy our products? And we decided to go value addition. So we've got an extra 4 lines which are doing products like biscuits. We've got a biscuit manufacturing company. We're now into pasta. We are from the cereals line, and also the snacks, extruded snacks line. But within the maize unit, we then saw it imperative that as National Foods, we had a tagline, we feed the nation. And this has been our tagline for the past 60 years. So at that time, because now we decided to look at value adding our products, we thought we are now going to feed and nourish the nation. So over the past 6 years, we have changed from just feeding to now nourishing the nation. And how else can we nourish the nation when the maize product that we have has less nutrients than all other grains? So that's why we then embarked on a journey to introduce what we call smart carbs. So smart carbs is what we would call traditional grains in normal sense, but we've called them or termed them smart carbs because in addition to the starch or carbohydrate that you get from them, or just the protein, you're getting added benefits. There's high fiber, there's further nutrients, you have more iron, you have calcium, the B vitamins in some of these. So that's how we then birthed the baby smart carbs. On smart carbs, we then went with our millet, our sorghum, both finger and pearl millet, and we've got them now as just straight meals. So you've got your millet meal, your finger millet meal, and your sorghum meal. The offtake wasn't as good, so now that's part of the challenges. Because our Zimbabwean consumer is also used to having that white touch. If it's not white, it's not bougie, as we'd want to call it. So, we had to do a lot to get on our feet in terms of introducing those meals in the market. Further to them, we also launched instant porridges that contain baobab, from baobab. So they were multi-grain porridges with sorghum, millet, brown rice, and a bit of maize meal here and there. Whilst the offtake was okay, as big as we are as National Foods, we were looking at tonnages over 50 tons, you know. So for us to say, you know, we've sold a good product, we're looking at 50 ton sales or 20 tons to start with. But the smart grains were selling way below 5 tons. So when we are a 2,000 ton a month business and you can only sell 5 tons of a new product, then you know you start to raise alarms to our shareholders and you know to our employees at the end. So we then took a strategic decision to you know streamline and just see which lines we could continue with. So in terms of the porridges, we've since slowed down on those, and we only do maybe when a specific customer requests for tonnages like 10 tons and above. But we are no longer doing them because of that. And then this year, we then saw a sudden increase in the uptake of our traditional grains in the market. So from around 2020 to the beginning of the year, we were selling close to 5 tons combined, our finger millet, our sorghum, pearl millet meals. Now we're looking at 50 tons per grain. So that's how the business has grown. I think one of the push factors of that is how the government, with the products that Dr. Amai has been launching on traditional grains. So that type of marketing that they've been doing has also helped our sales, just like we helped your sales. So because, you know, we also want to get to every household, we've now gotten what we call blends of the meals that we make. So you'll find in the shop, you'll probably get, we call a multi-grain, which now contains maize and sorghum, because we want to address the palate which is used to white maize meal porridge or white maize meal as a sada.
So if you doing mighty meal, would you play with some maize in your sorghum porridge? Just asking.
Caroline is here. I'm not gonna answer now. Yeah. So so now we have about 7 lines of traditional grains or smart carbs that are on the market and are doing very well. We've earmarked to have them, you know, increase our volumes with the next year. So that's where we've gone with our smart cups or smart grains. On our cereals section, you know, now we are doing a lot of innovation work with our smart grains, with our, you know, local indigenous foods, baobab being one of them. We're also working with amaranth, we're working with buckwheat. So the biggest holdback for us in probably, you know, upscaling those projects has been the type of raw material that you'll get. So as a corporate or, you know, as any industry, if you set your machine to run at a speed, say, of 15, because you're using a certain grade of grain, once that grade changes, your machine can go bust. And with our type of machines, you know, we're talking about 4 hours downtime, just because we used a raw material with a different state. So the main challenge we have with our indigenous raw materials is that their quality is quite fluctuating. So you'll find a lot of stones in some of them. I think this year alone we've rejected close to 200 tons, but this is just on soybeans. You know, where we've gotten soybeans that it has high dust, high sand content, and you'll find, you know, we've probably milled a ton or so, and then you see, okay, we had a problem with the quality. So those are the main challenges that we have with local suppliers of our grains or our raw materials. The quality, it is just not consistent. We are also food safety certified. So that means we need to have suppliers who are able to at least match the type of system or the certification system that we have. Not necessarily being certified, but having a quality management system in place. So without that, we are unable to give some of the suppliers our contracts, because then it means that their management system of quality is not to the standard that we would want.
Do you work with NGOs at all? Like
So
your supply?
So we've worked with NGOs, but this is for different products, containing soya, like the CSB type of products. We have, however, we have an open door policy. Yeah, we do have a fully fledged R&D department consisting of the lady I'm with here, Michelle. So she does all our developments.
You're the scientist.
She's the brains. So we do work. We don't shun anyone away. So anyone who's willing to come and work with us on any project at all, we're willing to give it a go. We've done projects with various universities. I think the most successful one being with a collaboration between Marondera University and Chinoi, where they made the porridge using amakwindi. Yeah. So, and they've since commercialized that. So we are willing to work with NGOs. We are willing to do toll manufacturing for organizations, if you'd like.
Would you be willing to buy produce from farmers that, through an NGO? Because you were talking about quality.
Yes. So if it's through an NGO, then it means, they have standards or specs that they've shared with their farmers, and it's better for us to deal that way.
Yeah.
I think we once worked with chia seeds and sesame seeds, and we were buying from an NGO. Yeah.
So you have a bit of experience.
Yes.
So you mentioned quality as being a bit of an issue, sand maybe in these various commodities. Where would you have been sourcing that from? Would it have? You don't work directly with farmers, so there must be some sort of go-between.
There are go-betweens. I think for grains in Zim, we are only allowed to buy from either the GMB or the PHI, which is accredited to the government there. So those are our two suppliers, and they then do the work of getting from the farmers, etc. But that's for grains. For other raw materials, we can source on our own. For example, buckwheat and amaranth, we then had to get it imported because then it was of the quality that we wanted.
Just an opportunity for the panel. Are there any sort of questions that you have for one another before I open it up to the floor?
Grill ourselves before the people.
Okay, no. So maybe if we could take some questions from the floor or comments. Tony will come to you with the microphone so that our online guests can hear. Hi, Robert. Hi, Albert.
Thank you very much for the insightful presentations and discussion. My only question comes, the first appreciation is to say you are transforming raw livelihoods where the livelihoods are at threat. But how are we managing the human-wildlife conflict? Because at the end of the day, if you look at these wildlife and wild species or indigenous species, they are also the food for our animals. How are we managing that human-wildlife conflict in the process? Thank you.
I think maybe Caroline's the best.
So wherever we do any wild harvesting work, we always start with a resource assessment. And the resource assessment includes local consumption, getting an idea of local consumption, current local consumption, and that current local consumption includes animals, both domestic and wild. So when we do a resource assessment and we try and come up with sustainable offtake volumes, annual sustainable offtake volumes, we will count trees we will do transit walks and we will count trees and we will get an idea of, how much fruit comes from one tree, what percentage of trees fruits, males, females, things like that. But we also have a lot of conversations with, neighboring communities and headmen and councillors, etc., to get a really good idea as well of current local consumption, because we never want to disrupt that. And so that's not just the animals, but even local communities. A lot of these foods are also hunger foods often.
Yeah.
So we need to absolutely make sure that we leave behind, what communities will need to rely on in bad seasons. We leave behind what domestic animals will require. We leave behind what wild animals will require. And we also always leave behind, and I don't know why, because it's 20% for natural regeneration. And I say I don't know why, because we never actually see natural regeneration. It needs to be actively stimulated when trees are grown and protected. But so even that is considered. And then, that kind of takes into account human wildlife conflict. We then also, obviously, during the actual collection as well, there's always possible encounters with animals as well. But we find that communities kind of know where to go and when to go, not to come across the elephants and things like that. Actually, where we see most human wildlife encounters is at the homesteads, where people are drying their masao, or have piled up the marula fruits that they are gonna have to depulp to then crack the nut and get to the kernels. That's where we see most issues, is when the fruit is actually already at the homesteads. And that's why in a lot of areas we encourage a little bit what Wayne was already talking about, central aggregation places and central processing places, so that farmers keep the fruits at their homesteads for as small a period as possible. That is where we see most human wildlife conflict, interestingly enough. But I don't know if you want to add.
I think you've covered it mainly, and also that we're also working with the Forestry Commission, and they are really involved in that. So when they get a permit every year, we've got to declare how much we are going to harvest, or how much we're going to use or commercialize, vis-a-vis
What is there
every year. So it's something that is done, and that I think it's also closely.
Panic and selection.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael, and our panelists for this interesting discussion. I think what I liked is the emphasis on livelihood diversification, which is very critical at this point when I think our rural livelihood system is under threat due to climate change, and also reinforcement on agroecology, which is critical, and market-driven approach. But I think the major issue which we also need to discuss is sustainability of our business models beyond today. The country, I think, is under threat in terms of agriculture sustainability. I think there's evidence that through EMA that we are having 60 million trees being cut every year, and only 10 million are being replaced. So that's a risk which we also need to deal with. And more importantly, I think we've been in Ulilima, where Amaqimbi Madora it's one of the key livelihood option, but this year there was nothing. So the question is, how are we sustaining these non-timber forest products with the intent from the government to private sector to the communities? So that becomes our key challenge. What's the percentage total of regenerative agriculture to the total agriculture system? So you would see that as we go year by year, the percentage is getting lower, which becomes a risk for us, and it's important that we are discussing. And also maybe we may need to stimulate demand of these indigenous products. It's great that you are already initiating this, but the key question is how are we creating more business and more demand, because we are in competing with monoculture, the tobacco, the cotton. We have kind of grow the value chain so that there's business which is being sustained year by year. So our major challenge, maybe to summarize, is one, the cost of our products. It's still at a very high side, which may limit demand and growth in terms of long-term sustainability, or creating a value chain approach in terms of the business model. Then the second issue is also in terms of regional or export penetration. I think we have seen products from Zambia here, South Africa here. How are we also being intentional in terms of stimulating regional, I think you have mentioned the export, but regional demand, because we can actually start doing that to expand so that we create more business for ourselves as individual private sector players, and also for our smallholder farmers. Thank you.
Right. I think I've forgotten the first one.
I just wanted to bounce the question back at you first, where you were saying the cost is too high. What do you mean by that?
So it's the cost of your products. The cost of products from the private sector players is a bit high. For the indigenous cost from indigenous, is it crops or from the non-timber products?
Okay, you mean the cost of the finished product on the shelves?
No, the finished product.
Okay.
It's high, probably it's because of the way the cost at acquisition. But I think we are saying as a value chain, we are not competitive to encourage growth, a sustained growth. Because uptake will remain dwarfed because of that. We are just targeting a certain niche of our customer segment instead of diversifying and widening our customer segment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So maybe we can just ask the
Yeah.
private sector.
Why is the cost of sorghum meal higher than maize meal? Because the farmer doesn't get more for sorghum than she gets for maize.
I think Wayne has actually, spoken about it, that, you'll get from farmer at 170. And now when you come to Rari, it's already at 270. So there's a close to $70 extra that's been added to the final price. So we don't buy them ourselves. We buy from GMB and PHI, and I think it's African source. So because they're sourcing from second parties, from third parties, the price is high. I'm not sure if you have a different view to that.
But why?
I agree with that. So like in harvest, there's a lot of stock that's available. It goes for cheap, and then
But why
as
does
national foods or the big guys, not all of it should aggregate it properly and into storage properly. So it comes December, like now, I mean, we paid $1,000 for sorghum. Nemo beans, it's anywhere from $700. Now it's $3,000 a ton. Groundnuts, $3,000 a ton currently.
But what about maize?
So what I want to say is like maize is $480.
Why? Why
The
hasn't
imports in production. So again, the farmer is not growing enough. If he was getting paid properly, the 250 or the 230, because maize farmers get a lot more than $170.
Yes.
So if they were getting the same return as a maize farmer, you'd want to grow more sorghum. That's why the guys in the rural areas prefer to try and grow maize, because they can sell it easier and get a better price for it. So again, that's educating the small scale farmers on what prices in town, who the buyers are, what payment terms are like, how to manage the logistics of getting it in and out. They don't understand that, and we can teach that. Market reports for small, like we have these great market reports for us commercial guys. If there's a similar grain market report for the small scale guide, you can understand National Foods is paying this price. We've got to bring it. This is the specifications. Okay, we can aggregate ourselves and go to town and get a better price. And that's how we do logistics. These are the guys we use.
About creating regional demands, isn't it? If we haven't answered your question entirely, it's because it was very long, so you need to remind us that there are bits.
Okay.
But regional demands, I mean, we do export. We do export to, I mean, I know Biz has just exported to, in this past month, to South Africa, to Namibia.
Yeah.
So
Okay, thank you so much. Mine is a very short one. Yeah, I think you mentioned the issue of DDT. Yeah, last week I was in Muzaraban. People were actually spraying, and DDT is still being used in Zimbabwe, and it can spend up to 40 years. It's not only the only organic pest and pollutant, there are actually more others which are also being used. So my question, you observed that, there was a lot of DDT when farmers do processing on their own, then you decide to do the processing on your own. But can you see that there's a gap which private sector need to do, like for example, advocacy for total banning of this one, or maybe to have other options which are viable? And I think as private sector, it's our duty to advocate for that. So what are you doing in that space? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, you're very right. We have lobbied with the ministry. We have highlighted the fact that certain areas, they are using DDT because it's not officially used everywhere. And what we've learned is that it's used in a cyclical manner. When they've used certain pesticides and they find that there's resistance that has been built, they come in and they put a bit of DDT in that particular year. We have come in to lobby from a business point of view to say, well, look, what it means is that stock from that area then cannot be commercialized. But the response we're getting is that we do not want to lose lives to malaria because we want to sell produce from there. So it's a question of which one to use. But I think all stakeholders know that DDT is not the best. It just happens to be the cheapest. Yeah. And possibly, apparently, very effective. Yeah. Once it is sprayed, you don't have to respray that here. So it's balancing those two. Apparently, when it comes to government,
it's really about the price.
It's the price.
I mean, it's paid for by donors.
Yes.
So actually, it's not the government you want to lobby; it's the donors, and they want to save money, so they do it by spraying DDT all over Zimbabwe. There are other pesticides that are available, but they're more expensive, and you have to repeat.
You have to repeat. Yeah. So we have sent out letters and everything, but again, I think it's more people that need to support that initiative, not only from a business point of view.
My question is for Wayne. You've said you had some challenges in one of your key raw materials. I think it was the groundnuts. That is because flour, making the flour. How do you solve that?
That's how I feel. So we just found a way to crush the peanut into a powder form
without turning it into butter.
Without making it peanut butter.
So he's now a politician.
You're crushing it without removing the fat. Sometimes 40% oil content in the ground.
That's good for your porridge. It's good for you. It's good for us.
Yeah. So yeah, we're
not taking it out. So we roast first, and then from there. My colleague is sitting next to me, and she's got a year's wine.
Hi. I have a comment and a couple of questions. So I have worked in this space myself for a long time, but last few years extensively in Zambia, and I've just been, I was employed by the Ministry of Green Economy to develop Zambia's climate investment plan. So this conversation is extremely pertinent to what we've been doing in Zambia. And Zambia has extensive, or probably it's the fastest deforesting country. We have 263,000 hectare per year deforestation. It is mind-boggling and horrific. So, I just wanted to bring that out, that the whole conundrum about developing the forest base, so nature-based value chain, is really, really proving to be quite challenging because you have I know the supply chain, I work for a supply chain company. But so my question is that our Baobab product, which I have used and I still use, how long was the process of the value chain development until National Foods came about developing the product and the raw material supply chain development? It would be great to just get a rough ballpark figure and the desired volumes that we need as a private sector. I have for ETG, so I understand the commercial production requires steady quality raw material. And then we are starting out new product development, which is so little, and then you have sourcing problem. So I think this is where it is quite stuck in Zambia right now. In many parts, there are already some porridge in the market, but there is not a whole lot of development. Let's put it this way. So that's one key interest. And second question is, do we face a challenge of the deforestation? Not necessarily baobab. I hope that there is no baobab tree. Are there regulations? And is there any active tree planting that is associated with baobab? So some of that. Thank you.
I think most of it is for me.
Yes. So let me start with the last question to say, well, look, as an organization, in terms of our natural resource management plan, we are actively involved in tree planting with the communities that we're working with the schools, with the Forestry Commission. We have nurseries at our processing centers where we are propagating baobab seedlings.
Other seedlings.
And other seedlings as well. Now we are incorporating other seedlings. But when we started, it was mainly just to focus on what we were actually using. But for now, we have now actually grown it to be much more. And then we give those to the communities. As I said, we are working with clusters of women, or whatever. They're mainly women. 80% of them are women. But we give them to those clusters to then plant them in the forest and also adopt those trees, because it's not just the planting. We find it's not just the planting. You can plant it and leave it there and the goats come and eat it and so on. So what we do is we've got some projects together with our customers where we are giving out seedlings and the family adopts the tree and looks after it. And after it gets to a certain height, we give them some sort of a commission. So that makes sure that at least those trees are looked after and they will get to actually fruit and for the next generation.
But it does take a very long time. It's 100 and something years
Yes,
for a baobab tree.
yes.
70 years.
So I
70.
think that just to add to that whole tree planting thing, I'm deeply skeptical about tree planting, because if you ask foresters and tree ecologists, it's 80% loss. So 80% of those trees that you plant don't survive. So what's much more important is what these guys are doing in terms of getting people to put a monetary value to conserving the forest and encouraging people to conserve existing trees.
Yeah.
And that's from a climate change mitigation perspective as well. You plant a tree and it takes hundreds and hundreds of years to absorb the amount of carbon that a fully mature tree adopts. And of course, the other reason we're having massive deforestation in Zimbabwe, thankfully, we don't have as much charcoal as Zambia, because Zambia, your problem is charcoal. Zimbabwe, our problem is tobacco. So really, the government needs to make a policy decision. Do we want to have forests or do we want to have tobacco? And can't we switch to other crops which are more sustainable? Because no matter how many people try and find sustainable fuels for tobacco, it's just never really going to work, because trees are free. So why would you pay for something if you can just chop down a tree and it's free?
And then, I mean, one of the main causes of deforestation also is fuel woods. You know, most people don't have electricity or gas, so they need to cook on wood. And so what we also do is we collaborate a lot with organizations who can help, you know, make sure that people don't cut the tree. So, you know, you have these fuel efficient stoves that are being introduced with communities that we work with. Also, the baobab shells, the marula nut shells and things like that are actually quite easily made into briquettes, you know, charred and then turned into briquettes. So there's quite a bit of that sort of starting to happen now as well. So
aren't you guys also doing biochar?
We've just also started doing biochar, but our biochar has been put back into the soil.
Yeah. But you can actually have pyrolytic stoves, which you can cook on, and then the byproduct is biochar. So you get energy and a fertilizer.
Yeah.
So this is where we need to go. This is the direction.
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. So I've just got 3 quick questions. First one is for you, Anna, and then the other sort of 2, 3 include our private sector and you as well, Anna. So the first one was you were talking about numerous studies that have been done on the efficacy of a lot of the indigenous products that we have here. Would yourself or anybody else who's now operating or working with non-timber forest products, would you be able to direct where this information is? We're relatively new and emerging in this field. So we're 18 months old, but we face a challenge where you were talking about sort of perception that comes with introducing, you know, the grains into the palate of someone who's used to the bougie white meal. So the perception there is for a lot of people where it's like, I grew up rural, I had to eat this all the time. Don't make me eat this now. I'm living in town. Whereas with the town people, now you're pushing the superfood. But other than information on Google that says it's been known to, do we have anywhere where there's sort of hard data on the herbs and stuff like that? So I will be hijacking you straight after this.
Well, I mean, you've got to look up reputable studies.
Yeah.
So a lot of the information is a lot of really good, high quality academic research is available for free now on the internet, thanks to a lot of the changes in policies. But you've got to make sure that it's a reputable institution, because a lot of researchers are paid by companies to find
exactly, and that's the challenge that we're facing. Because if you're introducing like a new product to an external market, for example, and they're not familiar with Shimenia oil, you want to at least be able to give them a reference, or say, you know, olive oil is ABC, so this is similar to, but it's just indigenous to this part of the world.
But I mean, to be honest, I would do exactly the same as what you're doing. I would Google, but not just using Google. I would use Google Scholar, and I would vet the study by looking at whether it's a reputable academic institution that has conducted the study, and looking to see if the study is biased in any way, if there's a disclaimer to say we're not related to any corporation. So, I mean, I can't give you exact studies, but I can just advise you on how to look for reputable studies.
Okay.
And that's my advice. Yeah.
Great. Okay. And then the second one is.
So to add on to that point.
Also want to add. Go ahead.
Right. So to add on to that point, we've started working with local universities. So you know how we are now going to education 5.0 in terms of our education system is. So there's a lot of innovation that is going on in universities with regards to our traditional grains. I think they use it. The pharmaceutical department. They've now got a traditional or what they call indigenous plants department, where they're looking at the benefits of using those indigenous plants in health provision, and they use it. They've got an innovation hub, and they're working with products such as that. So whilst for the product that you want to introduce, you might not have you might not find research for it yet, but if you partner with university, they will be like the guiding light and help you in your project.
And then the second question again sort of relates to sustainability, but it's coming more from the point of, like I said, being relatively small and obviously wanting to make sure that as we set up our structures, we do it right from the start. Patricia, you were mentioning that, you know, when you're a single voice trying to advocate for something, are there associations that won't, because obviously the areas that we're looking or have started to work in is very much up Zambezi Valley, so Yombiri, Mzarabani and all of that. And so what we're wanting to know is, are there associations? Is there a sort of comprehensive group of people that are advocating? Because those are the questions that we're asked even when we do go out for stakeholder engagement meetings out there, is what are you doing to ensure sustainability? Now, Caroline, you guys were up there doing the resource mapping, etc. But I think it's also that what happens after a harvest? Is there anyone who goes into the forest then to check, like we as Kanakis have come in and said, we're only taking 10 tons. Who's policing that? So that when we are advocating for protection of the forest and for protection of the communities, etc., we're also showing ourselves to be somewhat accountable. But then you've got those that come in with the 30-ton truck, and who's watching them? So it's one of those, is there a concerted effort right now, or something that we can join or form that where we can be part of a voice that's speaking towards the greater sort of conservation efforts that we're doing?
So we do have a traditional grains association. It hasn't been very active. It's being revived now, and we're changing a little bit to bring in the legumes side. It's generally about grain.
Right.
So we've got a new chair lady. There's going to be an interim committee until first quarter of next year. And then we'll try and get a proper committee, but we're just trying to restructure a little bit and bring in your trees products and your legumes as well.
Okay.
So you can take my number and we'll keep you informed. We'll launch something in the next week or two on that.
Okay, awesome, great. Thank you so much.
And then, when it comes to being wanting or able to show that you do things sustainably, that's where third-party certification schemes come in.
Yeah.
Like your Fair Wild certification, your access and benefit sharing agreements. Because, in theory, who is supposed to make sure that things are done sustainably in a district are the rural districts council and, the local chiefs and headmen and the, environmental management committee and subcommittees. They are the ones responsible to check that these things are done. It's not your role to do that.
Right.
It's your role to, like what Patricia was saying at the beginning of the season, to agree on the volumes that will be harvested. But then it is their tasks to ensure that you're not
taking any
doing things in the night and things like that. So,
But it's a very important issue, because really it's also the responsibility of national government to make sure that there aren't unscrupulous people doing exactly what you're saying. And there are international treaties, which I believe you've been working on to try and get the government to sign. But I don't know what they're stalling or.
No, they've signed. It's a national legislation. Access and benefit sharing is national legislation and needs to be domesticated at district level. That's where it now is becoming a little bit complicated, because it means that districts have to develop their own bylaws.
Yes.
Pick from that national legislation what is relevant to them, and
it's a challenge, because when we were up in Zarabani in June, that was exactly what they were saying at district was, how do you, if someone decides to put a fence around a Musawo tree that was, 3 months ago was communal, but now it stays, how do you, distinguish ownership? How do you put these laws in? So
you need a bylaw for it. Yeah. Because then once you have a bylaw, you can police.
Thank you. Good. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everybody. I've got 2 parts. Annie, you've answered the part of that question already. Well, are there any of these plants that we think we would have to start cultivating? Maybe not baobab, but I was thinking things like masao. There was a jam on the market here at one stage about 20 years ago. The other thing I wouldn't like people to be discouraged when they leave here thinking about DDT. I used to be in Ministry of Health at some stage. I know the DDT sprays are supposed to be done inside huts, so they shouldn't be getting into the general environment.
That's where people store their produce, you see, unfortunately.
Under their beds.
Yeah.
So that's exactly how it does get into the produces, but from the hut. It just rains down onto the produce.
Yeah. So that's why part of what these guys do is they make sure that their collectors build a dedicated, separate little storage space where things need to be stored. And that solves their problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
it should be possible to find out from like the medical director for the province, like the provincial medical director, if DDT is going to be used in that area. And that, you know, forewarned is kind of forearmed in that situation. Yeah, well, thanks very much.
Hello, everyone. I just want to compliment everybody for the effort, the work that is being put into value creation in our indigenous species. But I always come back to the sustainability issues. I know it's been talked about, but the fact that it's happening, I just want to bring to everyone's attention the Kigelia issue. We know what's happening with that particular plant. Everybody loves it somehow now. And yeah, Mubve, if you know it. And if you move around, I've seen for the first time such trees, some are drying because they've been ring-bugged. Now, the question that I have is, I know we've got controls, you can talk about Forestry Commission, but I'm going to make a call to all the private players that I think it's now high time we become more intentional in these sustainability issues. It's not just about collecting from these communities, because the value that we're creating, people see the value, but people also want to harness that value, maybe not through you who understand the systems, but they're finding their own markets, they're exploiting the resource, and we see a huge danger. If we just wait for the authorities, we know in some places, we know the issue of corruption in this country. How these things happen. So what are we doing? It may not need an answer now, but what are we doing as corporates, as people who are running their businesses off these resources? What are we doing for the long-term sustainability of our environment? Well, if we go at this rate, trust me, some trees are not as some plants are not as resilient as the baobab. I see the mve tree going extinct anytime soon. Or for example, if you remember what happened during COVID, everybody knew that what's the plant?
Zumbani.
Zumbani, yes. From where I come from, it disappeared for a bit during the COVID time. And I think the only reason why we see them coming back again is the pressure has been taken off because nobody uses them like that anymore. So what are we doing? I think it's a discussion that we need to continue having so that we become more active from the corporate world rather than leaving it to government only. Thank you.
Great. I was going to say we need to start winding down, but it looks like we have exhausted some of the questions. I just got a final one, maybe for Karen. Oh, Tony's got registers at the back there. Please, could you sign it? I think they'll probably just push him in, yeah. To Caroline, I think a study was done maybe a few years ago, maybe by Gus, on the top plants that lend themselves to commercialization. Perhaps we've discussed fab, which is already quite commercial, and the small grades. But what else is there? Where do you think there might be good potential to sort of exploit a particular species?
Okay. I can mostly talk about, because that's where our expertise is the wild stuff. But we still see a lot of potential in nuts and seeds for natural oils. You know, natural oils that go into cosmetics and body care. We definitely see lots of potential there. So that's your marula, your manketti, your sour plum, your Kalahari melon, that. But we this year have really started focusing on wild fruits because we see a lot of potential on the domestic market for wild fruits, be it in beverage, be it in food products, and then also be it in tourism and hospitality. So yeah, that's really where we've now put a lot of our sort of like efforts, is trying to convince private sector to look at things like Masao, jackleberry, monkeyberry, just trying to think, hacha, mashanje, baobab, obviously. So yeah, those are the ones that we think have potential in juices, cordials, wines, beers, spirits, but also breakfast cereals, jams, and other spreads, snacks. So yeah, baked products. But it's like every other day I ask Sky, how about, shall I bring you a sample of? And Sky is like, no, I'm focusing on this one. But so yeah, wild fruits, we see a lot of potential there. And yeah, I think that's it. And then, like I said, I think still lots and lots of potential for small grains, Nemo beans, cowpeas, even though Wayne doesn't seem to believe in them a lot. Nemo beans, actually, Bambara nuts recently got novel foods approval from the European market, so we can even export them into Europe now. So that's good news. But like I said, we try to really first focus on domestic markets. Let's first make sure that people here eat properly before we start exporting our good things.
So you might have got it that Caroline lives and breathes this topic. Just the other day, she WhatsApped me and said, I see Pick and Pay have got a new bread on the market and they're claiming it to be high fiber, and can't we go and speak to them? And
they had added soybeans, and then it was like, soybeans, why? Like, why not Bambara nuts?
Anyway, it's a great advocate. I'd just like to give the panelists each an opportunity to, if there's something else on your mind, or something you'd like to say just as we close up. Right?
Not really. Maybe I see there's a lot of corn soya blend tenders out there. There could possibly be a bit more sorghum soya blend tenders. But a healthier product, it's sweeter, and it's creating a demand for the small scale farmer.
Patricia?
I think just to also say, I think it's very necessary that we look at looking at sustainability proactively as opposed to just reactively, and that is the way for corporates to go.
So maybe just echoing what we heard earlier on. Thanks, Patricia. Scott?
I think most organizations have an open door policy, and universities are there to help us. We don't necessarily have to pay universities for the research that they conduct. So we should make use of them, especially when we are trying to introduce, our local indigenous products, and we need to lay claims on them. So for you to lay a claim on a product, for it to be having this health benefit, etc., you need to ensure that you have done a study and you've done your research on that claim. So universities are available, and most of them have an open door policy. If you can't reach them, you can come to me and I'll link you to them.
Thank you, Sky. Anna?
Just that sustainability issue. I mean, I hear you all, and it's something that really concerns me a lot, especially about the wild foods. I mean, what you were saying, wild foods are a communal resource. They don't belong to anybody. So there are lots of issues about who benefits financially from them. If they're a communal resource, then the community as a whole should really benefit. So it's not easy, but these guys are the ones who've come closest, as far as I've found, to figuring out the huge minefield that this is. And you've got to have some good guys in place to prevent the huge stream of bad guys coming in, because the potential is enormous. So I think that, with all these sustainability issues, thank goodness we've got some good guys who are there, who are watching, and you who are watching, because otherwise it's just a free-for-all, because these resources have a huge commercial value and they'll be plundered.
Thank you, Anna. And I'll leave the final words for you, Carol.
Well, I just wanted to add to what Anna was saying, because obviously, exactly, sustainability, that's actually why we do non-timber forest products, because we hope it's a way to conserve biodiversity. That's really what we believe. And we believe that non-timber forest products have huge potential, but like what Anna is saying, conditions need to be right. So if as an NGO you're thinking of getting into non-table first product work, please call us. We can help you with, doing a resource mapping for you or telling you how to do a resource mapping. We can teach your field staff how to teach communities to sustainably harvest, to process according to market requirements, because otherwise you're not going to find a market. I mean, we're there for that. And to private sector, let us know if you want a sample. Let us know if we can help you source something. We're here for you.
Thank you, Caroline. So I think it's just to say thank you so much to our team of specialists here. I always benefit so much when we have these discussions, and just, would like to thank you individually.
Thanks for inviting us. Yeah.
And thank you, members and guests, for coming and learning with us. Just one announcement. Our next forum is on the 21st of this month of November. We'll be looking at livestock. What is it, Rodney? Livestock traceability. So we've got 2 companies with traceability systems with potential for enhancing collateralization of livestock in Zimbabwe. And then we have our senior executive event on the 5th of December. So watch your emails for that. So thank you very much. Oh, Wayne, only need to take a picture. All right, we need to stand up.